and I talked. Good to be here and to be able to share with you about MDS. Just a little bit about myself. My wife and I do go to Rossmere Mennonite Church. Anybody know where Rossmere Mennonite Church is? It's just right outside of Lancaster. So we're part of the Lancaster district. I grew up at Herb Mennonite Church between Mannheim and Lititz. But yes, my wife and I do live in Mannheim. We have 4 children, 5 grandchildren. I worked in construction most of my life. Worked with Habitat for Humanity about 10 years at different places down in Georgia. Lived in Zaire, Africa for 2.5 years, sponsored by MCC, but working with Habitat and building houses in the Equator region of the African continent. Came back and got married and was asked to go to Immokalee, Florida. My wife and I spent 5 years there, helping to build houses through Habitat. But when I moved back to Lancaster in 1984, I was able to start a construction business and did rough framing mostly, did that for about 28 years. And I heard about an opening at MDS. I've always been interested in housing, always been concerned about substandard living conditions, inadequate housing conditions, and so MDS made sense, and so I've been on staff now for 9 years working with MDS. So I'm happy to be here this morning, share with you a little. Your church certainly has been involved, as I've learned, which is great. I'll share a little bit about that. But Mennonite Disaster Service has been responding to disasters for over 70 years. Many volunteers have served, some for days, some for weeks, and some for months, to help clean up and rebuild after a natural disaster or a man-made disaster here in the U.S. and Canada. Some might ask, why serve with MDS? Jesus was asked by a law expert, what is the greatest commandment? Matthew 22, Jesus replied by saying, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. How do we love our neighbors? Those that are blessed with health and strength can reach out to those that are not blessed in the same way. More and more, I see the purpose and the role of MDS is to connect that person that needs the help with the person who is willing to serve. The MDS mission statement is, Mennonite Disaster Service is a volunteer network of Anabaptist churches that respond in Christian love to those affected by disaster in Canada and the United States. While the main focus is on cleanup, repair, and rebuilding homes, this service touches lives, nurtures hope, faith, and wholeness. The vision statement for MDS is to inspire and equip every Anabaptist congregation to respond in Christian love with volunteers to those affected by disaster. This congregation has been supporting MDS a long time, and we thank you for that support. Without volunteer and financial support, MDS could not continue. I asked our development manager for numbers of volunteers and funds contributed by Martindale Mennonite Church. He said that since 2006, $61,201 was sent in the support of the ministry of MDS. Since 2000, 80 volunteers have served on many projects. They could be the same volunteers, but 80 times someone from this church went and served on an MDS project. Some of those sites were fires in Bastrop, Texas, floods in Bennettsville, South Carolina, floods in Detroit, Michigan, floods in Conway, South Carolina, Superstorm Sandy in New York City, tornadoes in Pilger, Nebraska, bridges in West Virginia, fires in Okanagan, Washington, and I think that's where the group is going soon. And many, many more sites. I was amazed when I saw the list of the number of sites that volunteers from this church have gone. Also, some of you were drivers for moving equipment to sites to open and close. Volunteers are who keep MDS going, and it makes it possible for helping communities that experienced a devastating disaster that changed their lives forever. So how's MDS doing carrying out that mission right now? In the fall of 2020, farmers in central Pennsylvania experienced a severe drought. MDS was contacted, we investigated, and found many Amish farmers could not keep their dairy farms going without more corn silage and hay for their cattle. The MDS Region 1 Board of Directors got involved and encouraged farmers here in Lancaster and in Lebanon counties to consider sharing their bountiful crop with those farmers who had very little due to no rain. As word spread, more and more farmers got involved. Donations of feed and funds were requested. The fall of 2020 and the winter of 2021, feed was transported to the hardest hit drought areas up in Central County, up in that area. Over 190 farmers received corn silage, hay, and bedding. Over 12,000 tons of feed was transported. Over $420,000 in cash was contributed, and another $400,000 was donated by farmers and businesses. We say, to God be the glory. When a story is told of a need, it gives opportunity for people to respond, and some of you may have been involved with that project. Another recent project happened in Knoxville, Pennsylvania. This is in Tioga County. Tropical Storm Fred had damaged floods in northern Pennsylvania and southern New York this past August. Many homes and several churches that we were aware of received flood damage. I went with the chairman of the North Central MDS unit, Wilmer Martin, and we met the pastor of the Valley View Assembly of God Church in Knoxville. They had a concrete floor in their sanctuary covered with carpet. Several inches of water covered the floor, and mud was everywhere. I saw the property a few days after the storm, and mold had already started growing up in the wooden pews sitting in the mud, just as these pews are sitting on this carpet. We knew of an Amish community in that area. We asked if they would have some young, strong volunteers to help us remove the pews and the carpet. We asked them on a Friday afternoon, and Saturday morning, a van load of 10 volunteers came and helped to start the cleaning process of that mess. Hurricane Ida hit much of the eastern Lancaster County this past September with a flooding event. It damaged a church that was part of the Petra group of churches in Downingtown, Pennsylvania. MDS volunteers helped to remove all of the debris in the basement of this and in the sanctuary. The water completely filled up the basement, and a few inches came up into the sanctuary. The carpet needed to be removed, along with the wainscoting in the sanctuary. They filled several large dumpsters. I stopped by the site several weeks after the storm, and the mold in the basement on the floor joists was just everywhere. During Hurricane Ida, Mullica Hill, New Jersey, in the southern part of New Jersey, had a tornado destroy about a 13-mile long, quarter-mile wide area. Many trees were knocked down. MDS volunteers spent several days removing tree debris from people's property. You might have seen the news over that time, but a dairy farmer in that area had every building on his property damaged. He managed a large dairy farm of about 1,400 head of cattle. 10 cows were missing. They say they never did find them. Barn roofs completely blown off. MDS volunteers did not assist with that job, but fortunately, several building contractors helped to repair the buildings quickly after the storm. The cows needed to be milked several times a day, even if the buildings were destroyed. I understand that in Montgomery County, not all that far from here, many homes were flooded during Hurricane Ida. Some of the families I hear are still living in hotels. So we don't need to go to the Gulf of Mexico or the damage that happens with the fires in California to find people in need of help. There are many needs right here close to home. I'd like to share a video at this time of our review of what MDS has been working on in 2021. Let's see if we can make this happen.
Being without your home, when you've had your own home for a whole lot of years, and now all of a sudden you're in a totally different situation, it was not easy.
Every house has damage. Everyone's home got some type of damage.
This flood here is the third time that we've gotten flooded. This is the worst.
Everything was destroyed. Everything. We cried. We were devastated.
People want to serve, and it's really all honor and glory to God. You know, they want to serve and help somebody, and it's a way to help.
We're supposed to help each other. I believe in that very strongly.
This is what we do. It was a person in need and nowhere else to go.
God has always provided a way. They're working on my bridge down there and trying to get it finished up so we'll have a new bridge to run over. Doing a real good job.
Something like this was the perfect type of project, I think, because you got to learn how to do it, you got to design it, and then you actually get to go build it and see what the product of your work is.
We are here at the Mount Academy on what I think is my favorite project ever that we've done, the modular that we are building in concert with the Mount Academy and MDS, who have all come together to work with us to construct our very first modular home for a family in need of affordable housing.
We have a group from Lancaster that have been wanting to volunteer. They are all first-time volunteers on this week's trip. There's a lot of organizations that are involved down here, and everyone is in the early response phase until all the mold is stopped and everything's dried out, and then they can come back in and rebuild.
We are in Charm, Ohio, at the PHP site where we have finished 6 buildings destined for Dayton, Ohio, tornado relief, and West Virginia flood relief. It's a project where we can use local volunteers who may not necessarily travel to the sites, but can donate a day or two.
On this project, I've learned a lot of timber framing, construction, and also roofing. I've never done roofing before. That was the first for me.
We built this family kind of connection with each other, which really helped us to be having better communication.
We all know that if we have someone volunteering when they're young, guess what? They will volunteer throughout their life.
And to find these young people that come out and work like this, and it gives you hope. It really does. It gives you hope for the future.
the youth that it's going to change the way they think. When they get back home, it's going to give them an appreciation for what they have. And when they see things like this in such a traumatized state, they come home and they appreciate the little things much more.
Being involved with groups like MDS and the Amish volunteers that are trying to meet their mission, they're helping us meet our mission for the residents of our community. Change the trajectory of that family, change a generational poverty.
It's a lovely and amazing thing to bring hope and stability to a family in this way.
MDS has not only helped this family, but they've helped the families to come afterwards.
Over 300 people worked on my house. To me, that represents over 600 hands of love, because that's what went into this house, was love.
I never really thought that I would have been chosen and this was going to be mine until the day I got my keys and walked through the door just so happy. And I had a safe place for my babies to grow up in and a place that we could call home.
I always say that we look tall because we stand on the shoulder of giants. And those giants are MDS, Disaster Aid. Without them, I don't know where we would be, to be honest.
MDS has helped us realize what the potential is after you suffer a disaster like we have. We were in crisis mode and didn't know how we were going to dig out of this, and MDS really helped us see a vision for the future.
This is home, where hands and feet of Jesus walked, restoring hope, bringing peace. Now, in dedication, may God's hope and God's peace abide in this place always. Amen.
This is the most beautiful, beautiful house. I am so very thankful and very grateful. And that thanks also be to God.
I thought I would like to show one other short video here of the work that happened down in Downingtown, since it's not that far away, and it's early response work. So let's watch this short video.
And do this instead. First up is vegetable oil. The name refers to any oil that comes from plant sources, but most vegetable oils on the market are a blend of canola, corn, soybean, safflower, palm.
This flood here is the third time that we've gotten flooded out. This is the worst. It really came all the way up to the sanctuary floor. And you're looking at least 12 feet, you know, because the whole basement was full of water, and then the water came up the steps into the sanctuary, so that's a pretty good height. So when that happened this time around, well, we decided, you know, it's no longer, well, there's no use in us even staying here any longer, because it's going to happen again. Well, maybe the Lord's trying to tell us something, you know, that we can't stay here. It's time, He wants us to move. So we're going to just try to find someplace else to go that's in a safer area. Brother Lester Zimmerman, who is a member of the group of churches that we rent from, he had gotten in touch with the Amish and the Mennonite. What's happening here today is a godsend.
This past year, is it finished? But it didn't stop yet. Okay, see if that did it. This past year has been a challenge for MDS, just as it has been for all of us dealing with the COVID pandemic. When the virus struck in March 2020, MDS had 15 project sites open. All were closed immediately. Volunteers went home, work stopped, and left undone. We wondered when we might go back. We want you to know that as we were wondering if contributors would continue to contribute funds for the ministry, if volunteers would be willing to at least try to get back to those areas, that did continue. Contributors seem to be saying, we want you to do what you do. Storms continued to happen. MDS staff and volunteers worked at finding ways to continue repair work and to do it safely. We know that we cannot expect everyone to agree on what it means to send volunteers into another community and do it safely. Some things we have changed at our project sites are the way food is prepared and served, the way sleeping arrangements are handled. We don't have volunteers from one part of the country sleeping in the same room as from another part of the country. I'm sure you can imagine that wearing a mask issue is very divisive. Some volunteers say, if you require us to wear a mask, we won't go. Other volunteers are saying, if you don't require all volunteers to be vaccinated, we won't go. Going into this volunteer season this winter, we are getting back a little more toward normal than what we experienced last winter. Still far from what it was like 2 years ago. Projects are open in Paradise, California, in Okanagan, Washington. These disasters were forest fires. Volunteers are working in Jennings and Lake Charles, Louisiana. This damage was done during Hurricanes Delta, Laura, and Ida. We are working in Marianna, Florida. That damage was done during Hurricane Michael 3 years ago. MDS is building bridges, as you saw. When MDS was asked to build bridges, we said, we are about repairing and rebuilding houses. They told us, but people can't get to their houses because the bridges were washed away during the flooding event. So 5 years ago, we finally found a way to work at the insurance issues, the liability issues, the permitting issues, and we said we'd build 5 bridges. When those were finished, then we built 5 more. This past November, we worked on 2 bridges in Harmon, West Virginia, and that was the 110th and 111th bridges that MDS has been involved with, most of those in the past 5 years. Another area that MDS is investigating and doing some cleanup work is in Mayfield, Kentucky. That storm was so big, it did so much damage. It is a challenge to know where to start and who to help. Hundreds of volunteers expressed interest in going. We could not coordinate that many, finding a place to stay for accommodations and finding the folks that meet our criteria. So who do we help? There will be work in Kentucky, I think, for a long time, and MDS is involved. That's not in the region that I help to coordinate, but there's other coordinators in that area. We have our equipment that is there right now, tearing down some of the houses, getting ready for some of the rebuilds. Normally, we do not see tornadoes this late in the year. We had most of our equipment assigned to different sites that we were planned to work on. Tornadoes just do not normally happen this late in the year. Disasters are very unpredictable the past few years. One thing that has changed is that regions and units are working closer to home. Last spring, the local Lancaster MDS unit repaired a 2-story house here along Route 322, right in Ephrata. The house was being used by Homes of Hope Ministry. They worked with single moms, with children that needed temporary housing. 2 years ago, the house had a significant fire that damaged it. MDS volunteers got involved and removed everything down to the studs and rebuilt it with all new wiring, plumbing and heating, new shingles, new siding. Region 1 is looking at repairing homes in the eastern shores of Maryland, near Cambridge. They had a tidal flooding event last September. We're looking at rebuilding a house that was damaged in Darby, Pennsylvania, which is close to Philadelphia. We are being asked to help repair and rebuild homes in Hurley, Virginia, another area that had flooding this past September. This is a small town in southwestern part of Virginia. Here in Ephrata, we are in Region 1. This region is all the states that touch the Atlantic Ocean, plus West Virginia and Puerto Rico. There are 4 regions in the U.S., the way our organization has the country divided. Each region has their disaster, and they are responding to. MDS is a volunteer-supported and volunteer-driven organization. The work that gets done in the field is done by volunteers. We are able to respond to a community when volunteers are willing to serve. We are blessed to have volunteers that wish to serve God by helping others. Matthew 25:40 says, "The king will reply, 'Truly I tell you, whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it unto me.' So who is my neighbor?" MDS provides that opportunity to serve those in need by connecting those willing to serve with those that are affected by the disaster. Their lives are changed forever, and some of them in very personal ways. I was in White Sulphur Springs in West Virginia right after the terrible flooding event that happened, where over 20 people lost their lives in the flood of 2016. We were in the city hall asking how MDS volunteers could help, and the local person heard us talking. She asked if we could help her, that her house was destroyed, and then she put her hand up to her mouth and she said, "I'm sorry for the way I talk. I lost my false teeth in the flood." This affects people in ways that's hard for us to imagine if we haven't experienced it ourselves. We spoke to people that lost their medications. Unexpected disasters turns people's lives upside down. Every MDS volunteer has an opportunity to share Christ's love through their actions. Volunteers' lives are changed also. After serving with MDS, when you walk side by side with a family that just lost everything, you realize how blessed you are and what a privilege it is to brighten their day and bring some hope back into their lives as they are on a long journey to recovery. Jesus told the parable of the Good Samaritan. He shared 3 examples of how people respond when they see someone else in need. The priest was walking by, and he saw him, but passed on the other side. Next, the Levite came. He too saw, but passed on the other side. Then a Samaritan came by and saw him and had compassion on him and helped the robbed person by taking him for medical help. And Jesus said to the law expert, "Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers?" The law expert said, "The one who had mercy on him." Jesus replied, saying to him, "Go and do likewise." Each of us makes choices on how to live as we walk on our life journey. Many years ago, our pastor at Rossmere Mennonite Church, where my wife and I attend, encouraged us to select a verse, a life verse to live by. I chose Micah 6:8. "And what does the Lord require of you? But to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God." If we keep these 3 things in mind in all that we do, I do believe we will bring honor and glory to God with the life that we live. If we open our eyes, God will show us ways that we can bring hope to our neighbors.